Before we begin, let's settle into a quiet moment together. The kind of moment when stories breathe a little easier and the heart listens a little deeper. Somewhere in the shared memory of humanity, there lives a figure who seems to appear not just in books or traditions, but in the soft corners of childhood, in the warmth of giving, and in the gentle hope that kindness can arrive unexpectedly. Who is he, really? A myth? A memory? A reflection of something tender in the human spirit? Tonight, we're not chasing facts alone. We're following a thread, a psychological trail woven through centuries of imagination, generosity, and longing. A trail that leads to a man draped not only in story, but in something far more enduring: the human desire to believe in goodness. And as we wander through history, through whispers and legends and quiet acts of compassion, I invite you to join our little circle of curiosity. If you enjoy journeys like this, slow, thoughtful, filled with meaning, feel free to subscribe and stay with us as we explore more stories that have shaped the world in ways both seen and unseen. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The mystery begins. Winter begins quietly, not with a storm, not with a grand announcement, but with a hush. A soft veil of snow drifting down from a pale sky, settling on rooftops, chimneys, and the narrow streets that glow beneath warm, golden lamps. There's a stillness in the air, a suspension of time, as if the world is holding its breath. In that silence, a familiar figure seems to stir, a silhouette we've known since childhood, yet have never fully understood. Santa Claus. A name spoken with excitement by children, with nostalgia by adults, with curiosity by anyone who has ever wondered how stories survive through centuries. As the snow falls, the question rises gently into the night. Is Santa Claus real? Imagined? Or something deeper, hidden in the human heart? Because every December, no matter where we live or how old we are, something happens. We soften. We hope a little more, fear a little less. We look for warmth in others, for kindness, for connection. It is as if the figure wrapped in red, riding across snowy rooftops, awakens a quiet longing inside us, for generosity, for innocence, for wonder. But where did he come from? How did this mysterious bearer of gifts become a universal symbol, transcending cultures and centuries? And what does he reveal about us, our psychology, our hopes, our need to believe in something good? To answer these questions, we must walk backward through time, through frost-covered forests and candle-lit traditions, through medieval towns and ancient myths. We must follow the footprints Santa has left, not in snow, but in memory, in imagination, in the hidden corners of the human psyche. Because the story of Santa Claus is not merely a tale about a man delivering presents. It is the story of how humanity creates symbols large enough to hold our fears, our joys, our longing for comfort. It is the story of how a single figure can become a mirror, reflecting who we are and what we cherish most. Imagine, for a moment, a child standing by a frosted window. They don't see Santa, not directly. They see the glow of lights on snow, the whisper of wind, the outline of a tree decorated with hope. Yet in their heart, they feel him. They feel the presence of someone kind, someone who sees them, someone who believes they deserve something good, even if the world sometimes forgets to say it. This is where the mystery begins, not in facts or dates or historical documents, but in the emotional truth we silently carry. Santa Claus lives first, not in the North Pole, but in the collective imagination of generations who wanted to believe in kindness made visible. And so, our journey begins on this snowy night. Calm, cinematic, almost dreamlike, as we pull back the layers covering this beloved figure. We will travel to old villages where winter spirits roamed, to ancient celebrations where fire and hope mingled beneath the darkest skies. We will meet saints, storytellers, merchants, parents, and even psychologists who tried to understand why, year after year, a single myth touches so many lives. But for now, stand with me in the quiet. Feel the snow falling softly around us. Feel the glow of the lanterns brushing against the cold. And feel, somewhere deep inside, the gentle stirring of a mystery that has endured for over 1,000 years. Santa Claus. Real, imagined, or something deeper? The answer waits somewhere between history and heart, between snow and story. Tonight, we begin the search. Chapter 2. Saint Nicholas. Winter nights have a way of remembering things we forget. Long before the red suit, before the flying reindeer and the jingling bells, there was a quieter figure. A man who walked softly through the world, carrying kindness the way others carried lanterns. His name was Nicholas. And, though centuries have passed, the warmth he sparked has never truly faded. Nicholas was born in the 3rd century, in a coastal town called Patara, where the sea breathed against the rocks like a patient storyteller. He grew up under bright Mediterranean suns, not snow-filled skies. Yet, something about his spirit carried the gentleness of winter. Calm, reflective, touched with a softness rare in turbulent times. His parents, known for their generosity, shaped him with a sense of compassion that felt almost instinctive, as if he had been born already leaning toward the suffering of others. But fate, as it often does, arrived early. The loss of his parents came like a sudden storm, shifting his world from light to shadow. Grief, however, did not harden him. Instead, it sharpened his sensitivity to the fragile edges of human life. He inherited wealth, enough to live comfortably, perhaps even extravagantly. But Nicholas felt no peace in comfort when the world around him trembled with hunger, fear, and despair. And so he gave, quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. One of the most enduring legends tells of a poor man with 3 daughters, a story whispered in wintertime for centuries. The man was honorable, hard-working, but crushed beneath the weight of cruel fortune. With no dowries, his daughters faced futures steeped in uncertainty. In those days, poverty could shape destiny with brutal efficiency. Each night, the father sat in the dim light of a single oil lamp, wondering how to keep his daughters safe from a world that did not forgive the poor. Nicholas heard of the family's suffering, not because they asked for help, but because compassion has a way of listening to what is not spoken. And so, one night, under a moon pale as polished bone, Nicholas walked quietly to their home. The streets were dark, the wind sharp enough to slice through thin clothing. The small house stood at the edge of town, its walls weary from years of carrying sorrow. Nicholas held a small pouch in his hand. Gold coins, enough to change the family's fate. But he did not knock. He did not announce himself. Instead, he moved toward the window, where a faint glow leaked from inside. The daughters were asleep. The father sat, hunched, staring into the dying oil flame. Then, a soft sound, gold touching the stone floor, like a secret dropped into the world. He slipped away before gratitude could find him. The next morning, sunlight warmed the room. The father discovered the pouch and fell to his knees in disbelief. Joy, relief, and the quiet ache of being seen swelled in his chest. For the first time in months, hope returned. But Nicholas was not finished. On another night, he returned with a second pouch, and finally, a third. By the end, each daughter's future had been rewritten, not by miracle, but by deliberate, anonymous kindness. The anonymity mattered. Nicholas wasn't seeking praise. He believed kindness was its own silent reward. But the town whispered, wondered, imagined. Humans, after all, are creatures who long to explain goodness, to personify it, to anchor it somewhere real. And so a simple act of compassion became a legend, the seed from which the figure of Santa Claus would eventually grow. Yet the legend rests on something profoundly human. Psychologically, why did people choose to embody generosity in a single man? Because the world, especially the ancient world, was unpredictable and often cruel. People needed a symbol, a reassuring shape for the formless hope in their hearts. Nicholas became that shape. He was proof that empathy could exist even in the hardest times. Proof that goodness could arrive quietly, without demand, without recognition. When people told stories of Nicholas, they weren't just recounting events. They were expressing a longing to believe in the endurance of kindness, and that longing still echoes today. Imagine the cinematic frame. A dark room lit only by an oil lamp, a father's tired eyes softening as he lifts a pouch of gold. Outside, Nicholas steps away into the night, his figure small but steady under a sky full of stars. No dramatic music, no applause, only the whisper of the wind, carrying the sense that something good had just happened. Something meant to be remembered. That is where Santa Claus truly begins, not with magic, but with a man who chose compassion over comfort. Not with sleighs and snow, but with footsteps in the dark. Not with fairy tales, but with a real, beating human heart responding to the suffering of another. Nicholas's story spread far beyond Patara. Over time, his simple acts became symbols. Symbols became traditions. Traditions became myths. And myth, finally, became the figure we now call Santa Claus. A guardian of generosity. A reminder that kindness can be both humble and heroic. The first spark of Santa was not red or white. It was gold. Gold given in secret. Gold that carried hope into a home that needed it. And, perhaps more importantly, it was the gold of empathy, shining quietly in the dark. From this spark, a legend began to glow. One we still carry with us each winter, each story, each child's dream. For in Nicholas, we find the truth at the center of Santa Claus. That generosity, especially when unseen, has a power that outlives centuries. And this, truly, was the beginning. Chapter 3. Myths, Legends, and Winter Spirits. Before Santa. Long before the world spoke the name Santa Claus, long before red suits and chimneys and reindeer became familiar symbols of joy, winter carried its own ancient guardians, beings woven from firelight, shadow, fear, and hope. To understand Santa, we must first wander into these older stories, the myths, whispered around hearths when nights were long and cold pressed against the walls. Winter, in those distant centuries, was not a season of celebration. It was survival. Food ran low. Days shrank into thin slivers of pale light, and darkness stretched endlessly across forests and fields. In that darkness, imagination bloomed. People created figures to embody the forces around them, to explain the harshness of nature, to comfort themselves, to protect their families, to make sense of the unknown. And so the first spiritual ancestors of Santa were not jolly. They were powerful, mysterious, often frightening, yet, in their own way, deeply human. The story begins in the north, where icy winds scrape across mountains and snow falls like handfuls of crushed stars. There lived Odin, the ancient Norse Allfather, a figure of immense wisdom, but also great unpredictability. Around Yuletide, people believed Odin rode across the sky on Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, leading the wild hunt, a storm of spirits, warriors, and phantoms sweeping through the midwinter night. Imagine the sky black and trembling. Imagine a distant thunder that wasn't thunder. Imagine people huddled inside, whispering prayers as the air itself seemed to move. Psychologically, Odin represented a truth about winter, a reminder that nature could be both protector and destroyer. His presence symbolized the chaos of the cold season, its danger, its unknowability, its relentless power. But in this fear, there was also protection. Children would leave straw or treats for Sleipnir in their boots, hoping Odin's favor would bless their home with safety. Does that sound familiar? Boots filled with offerings in exchange for protection. A little spark shines here. One of the many flickers that would eventually become the warm glow of Santa Claus. Moving slightly south, we enter the Germanic forests, deep, quiet, breathing beneath heavy blankets of frost. Here, the winter spirit was Frau Holle, also known as Mother Holle or Holder. She was a guardian of women and children, a spinner of snow, a keeper of the hearth's warmth. The old tales say she shook out her feather pillows from the heavens, sending soft snow drifting down to earth. Unlike the fierce Odin, Frau Holle embodied the gentler side of winter. Care, domestic warmth, the promise of rest and renewal. She rewarded the hard-working, comforted the weary, and punished the cruel, a moral compass woven into the season itself. In a world where winter threatened life, her legend offered reassurance. Be good, be kind, be industrious, and winter will protect you. Human beings have always sought tenderness in harshness. Frau Holle became that tenderness. A psychological balm. She offered what people needed most. The sense that someone was watching over them when nights grew dangerously long. Her spirit would later echo in modern winter tales, not as Santa's precursor exactly, but as a guardian whose compassion shaped the emotional language of winter myths. Across the sea, in England, winter spirits took on yet another form. Before Santa, there was Father Christmas, an embodiment of festivity rather than fear. He was not a bringer of gifts at first. Rather, he represented the season's joy, feasting, community, firelit gatherings, warmth against the cold. Often depicted as a tall, robed figure with holly in his hair, he walked through villages spreading merriment, reminding people that even in the bleakest days, celebration was a necessity. Psychologically, Father Christmas filled a different void. Where Odin addressed fear, where Frau Holle soothed anxiety, Father Christmas reignited hope. He showed people that winter did not have to be endured in silence, that laughter and togetherness could push back the longest night. His role was to restore balance, to replace dread with delight, scarcity with sharing, cold with companionship. This shift, from fear to joy, from survival to celebration, marks a crucial turning point. It is one of the emotional bridges that leads us toward the modern Santa, a figure who protects us from darkness not with stormy power, but with warmth. All these legends, different as they are, share a deeper truth about the human psyche. When faced with darkness, we create light. When faced with cold, we imagine warmth. When faced with the unknown, we give it a face, often one that watches over us. Winter Guardians emerged not merely as tales for children, but as psychological necessities. They were mirrors reflecting our fears and our hopes. In times when winter could easily claim lives, people needed more than firewood and food. They needed meaning. They needed comfort. They needed symbols that could transform dread into resilience. By crafting winter spirits, some stern, some loving, some unpredictable, people found a way to live with uncertainty, to explain what frightened them, to protect what they cherished, to believe that even the harshest season carried hidden kindness. And here lies the quiet secret. Santa Claus did not appear suddenly. He is the heir to these guardians, the softest, most hopeful expression of humanity's longing to be cared for. As centuries passed, pieces of Odin, Frau Holle, Father Christmas, and countless local winter spirits began to blend. Their traits, protection, generosity, authority, joy, fused slowly, unconsciously, carried by oral stories, rituals, and memory. What emerged was not yet Santa, but something approaching him. A figure who walked the threshold between magic and morality. A figure who embodied winter's contradictions, cold and warmth, fear and hope, danger and kindness. The story of Santa was on its way, shaped by snowstorms, by candlelight, by ancient human longing. And like a shadow forming before the sunrise, the Santa we know today began quietly taking shape, long before he earned his name. Chapter 4. From Europe to America. When the first ships crossed the Atlantic, carrying families in search of new beginnings, they also carried stories, tucked into memory, folded into tradition, wrapped gently inside the human need for continuity. Among the clothes, tools, and keepsakes packed into wooden trunks, there traveled quieter treasures, legends of winter guardians, tales whispered at night, figures of generosity, discipline, and hope. Europe's old spirits, Saint Nicholas, Father Christmas, Santa Claus, and their many cousins, journeyed to the New World not on horseback or by sleigh, but in the hearts of immigrants who feared losing touch with the world they had left behind. America, young and restless, was fertile ground for transformation. Picture the early immigrant settlements, clusters of wooden homes, chimneys breathing pale ribbons of smoke into wide northern skies. Winter tightened its grip just as brutally as it had in Europe, and families sought comfort in familiar rituals. Dutch settlers spoke of Sinterklaas, riding a horse across snowy rooftops. German families told stories of Saint Nicholas and his night of gift-giving. English immigrants kept the warmth of Father Christmas alive around their hearths. These traditions mingled in crowded port towns and quiet rural communities. On winter nights, songs, customs, and tales wove together like threads of an ever-growing tapestry. What emerged in America was not a single story, but a convergence, a gathering of myths searching for a new identity. Psychologically, this blending reveals something essential. When people step into unfamiliar worlds, they cling to symbols that remind them of who they are. Traditions act like emotional anchors. They provide stability, belonging, continuity. And winter, with its long nights and existential stillness, has always been the season in which those anchors matter most. America, however, was not simply a place where old stories were preserved. It was a place where stories were reshaped. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, the young nation was trying to understand itself. Diverse, noisy, and constantly shifting, it longed for shared symbols, figures that could unite communities, bridge backgrounds, and create a sense of collective identity. Winter traditions, with their warmth and nostalgia, offered fertile ground for this cultural reinvention. Enter writers, poets, and illustrators, the architects of imagination. They began to pull pieces from different cultures, sanding edges, softening contradictions, blending histories until a new figure took shape. He had St. Nicholas's generosity, Father Christmas's good cheer, and the gentle domesticity rising in American holiday life. Santa, though not yet named as such, was beginning to emerge. In 1823, a poem quietly appeared in a newspaper in Troy, New York. It was titled, "A Visit from St. Nicholas," though most would come to know it as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." Its author, likely Clement Clark Moore, could not have known that he was about to alter the course of winter mythology forever. The poem's lines drift through history like soft snow. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf. His eyes, how they twinkled. His dimples, how merry. For the first time, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, Father Christmas, all these figures were distilled into one gentle, magical being with a sleigh, reindeer, a sack of toys, and a warm, mischievous personality. America loved him instantly. The psychological impact was profound. The poem offered something people longed for. A winter guardian who was not terrifying, like Odin's wild hunt. Not distant, like ancient spirits. Not tied to complex church traditions. He was friendly. He was safe. He was comforting. In a country of new beginnings, Santa became the perfect figure of emotional reassurance, a symbol of joy that transcended cultural divides. Soon, illustrators added their own magic. In the mid-1800s, artist Thomas Nast created a series of drawings for Harper's Weekly that would crystallize Santa's appearance. Nast rounded his figure, brightened his suit, and gave him a workshop at the North Pole, a place outside any nation, belonging to all. Through Nast's art, Santa became increasingly recognizable. Rosy cheeks, white beard, wide belly, and eyes that sparkled with kindness. This visual Santa aligned perfectly with America's growing ideals. He represented abundance in a time of economic hope. He embodied generosity in a society celebrating family and community. He created a shared story in a nation searching for unity. The transformation of Santa in America is more than a holiday evolution. It is a psychological phenomenon. New societies always need new symbols to guide them, reassure them,
and bind them together. America, with its swirl of languages, cultures, and traditions, needed a winter figure that felt universal, someone who could belong to everyone without erasing the past. Santa became that figure. He carried pieces of Europe, pieces of folklore, pieces of poetry, and pieces of American imagination. He embodied ideals that felt deeply human: kindness, wonder, generosity, joy. And as the nation grew, so too did Santa, not just as a character, but as a reflection of America's evolving identity. By the late 1800s, the transformation was complete. America had not simply adopted St. Nicholas. It had reshaped him, given him a new voice, a new look, a new spirit. Santa Claus, the modern symbol of Christmas cheer, had officially entered the world's imagination. But his journey was far from over. He would continue to evolve through art, commerce, media, and the shifting emotional needs of society. And as we step into the next chapter, his story will deepen even more, showing us how culture, psychology, and storytelling come together to create the beloved figure known across the globe today. Chapter 5: The Psychological Santa. Winter nights have a way of quieting the world, of slowing everything down just enough for old longings to rise to the surface. In that stillness, where fireplaces glow softly and snow drifts like feathers against window panes, humanity reveals something timeless: the desire to wonder, to hope, to feel protected. And in this soft, vulnerable landscape of the heart, Santa Claus became more than a myth. He became a mirror. Not a mirror of facts or logic, but a mirror of our psychological needs. The fragile, invisible layers beneath everyday life that rarely receive attention, yet guide so much of who we are. Santa, in that sense, was never merely a character. He was a symbol our minds instinctively shaped to hold the emotions we didn't know how to carry. Every adult carries a child inside, a quiet echo of who they once were. Often, that child is tucked away beneath responsibilities, disappointments, and the subtle erosion of wonder that accompanies growing up. Yet, the longing remains: to believe in magic, to feel uncomplicated joy, to be seen and loved without conditions. Santa became a vessel for that longing. Think of the way adults speak about him, with a smile, a softened voice, a momentary sparkle in the eyes. Even those who no longer believe speak with a nostalgia tinged by tenderness. Psychologically, Santa holds the memory of innocence, the part of us that once looked at the world with curiosity instead of caution. He reminds us that wonder does not vanish. It simply transfers. What we stop believing in literally, we often continue to believe in emotionally. So adults keep Santa alive, not for children alone, but for themselves. To reconnect, however briefly, with the small, hopeful version of themselves who once waited by a window, listening for sleigh bells they knew they would never truly hear. The human mind thrives on anticipation. It softens the monotony of daily life, giving us something to look toward, something that creates momentum in our emotional world.
Santa's story is built around waiting. Waiting not in fear, but in gentle excitement. The rituals surrounding him, writing letters, hanging stockings, leaving cookies by the fireplace, create a rhythm that reassures the mind. They say something joyful is coming. Hold on, keep hoping. For children, these rituals brighten the winter darkness. For adults, they provide a rhythm that bridges generations, linking past and present through shared gestures of play and expectancy. Psychologically, Santa is a promise, a soft reassurance that life still contains surprises, that something delightful might still be hidden just around the corner. And in a world where certainty is rare, that promise becomes emotionally essential. Human beings crave stories that stretch beyond the possible. They offer escape, but also healing. Santa's ability to do the impossible, fly across the world in one night, deliver gifts to millions, slip through chimneys untouched, activates a uniquely human response. The desire to believe in goodness that defies logic. Children accept this effortlessly. Adults accept it symbolically. Psychologically, Santa's power lies not in his literal abilities, but in the experience he provides. The widened eyes, the breathless excitement, the warmth of believing that kindness is omnipresent. He represents an emotional truth, that goodness, when amplified, feels magical. No part of Santa's myth is as psychologically complex as the idea of being naughty or nice. For children, it introduces early moral reasoning, the understanding that behavior has consequences, that kindness is rewarded, and that empathy matters. But beneath the surface, something deeper is happening. Children fear the possibility of not getting gifts, not because of the material loss, but because of what it symbolizes: the fear of not being loved, not being seen as good enough. Santa becomes, unintentionally, a figure of emotional accountability, a reminder that one's actions shape the world's response. It is one of the earliest psychological dances a child learns, the balance between desire and discipline, between wanting to be loved and learning how to behave in ways that nurture connection. For adults, the naughty or nice idea becomes playful, yet still symbolic. It represents a lifelong longing to be accepted, approved of, seen in a positive light. Santa becomes the gentle judge we wish the world could be, someone who notices our efforts, forgives our mistakes, and ultimately rewards our attempts to be better. Winter has always carried emotional weight. Shorter days, colder nights, the symbolic death of the natural world. All of it can create subtle anxiety deep in the human psyche. Across cultures and centuries, societies crafted winter guardians to soothe that fear. Spirits of protection, warmth, and generosity. Santa is the modern continuation of that ancient psychological need. He is the one who arrives precisely when the world is darkest, bringing light, gifts, laughter, and a reminder that warmth still exists. His presence rewrites the emotional script of winter, from desolation into celebration, from cold into comfort. In this way, Santa doesn't simply represent joy. He protects it, preserving it through the harshest season of the year. At his core, Santa Claus is a psychological creation shaped by centuries of longing, fear, hope, and imagination. He is who we needed him to be, a caretaker of childhood wonder, a symbol of generosity, a reminder that goodness persists, a keeper of ritual and anticipation, a beacon in the winter darkness, a gentle, moral guide, a reflection of our own desire to be loved. He is not real in the usual sense, but he is deeply, emotionally real, woven into our collective psyche, sustained by the stories we pass from one generation to the next. Santa is the part of humanity that insists on believing in warmth despite the cold, in generosity despite the world's hardness, in magic despite the demands of reason. And perhaps that is why he has endured, not because he lives at the North Pole, but because he lives in the quiet chambers of the heart, the place where hope takes root, no matter how old we become. Chapter 6: The Coca-Cola Santa and the Birth of a Global Icon. By the early 20th century, Santa Claus had traveled far from the snowy hills of Europe and the small villages where legends first whispered. He had become a familiar figure in American homes, yet he was not yet the vivid, round-bellied icon we know today. He existed in many shapes and forms: the tall, austere Saint Nicholas of Dutch lore, the nimble Father Christmas of English tradition, and the silent, snowy figures of winter postcards. Each version carried warmth, generosity, and hope, but none had yet captured the imagination of a global audience. It was in this subtle intersection of culture, commerce, and art that the modern Santa took shape. In 1931, the Coca-Cola Company commissioned illustrator Haddon Sundblom to bring Santa to life in a series of advertisements. Sundblom did more than paint a man in red. He painted a personality, round, jolly, rosy-cheeked, and exuding warmth. This Santa radiated comfort. He laughed, he leaned over fireplaces, he shared drinks and joy with families. The power of the image was immediate. People saw him and recognized something familiar, even if they could not name it. Psychologically, Sundblom's Santa appealed to a universal need: the human longing for reassurance, warmth, and the visible embodiment of joy. In the midst of the Great Depression, when uncertainty weighed heavily on minds and hearts, this Santa was a reminder that generosity and comfort could endure, even when life felt precarious. Red, bright, warm, and striking, became his signature. It is a color that grabs attention but also evokes excitement, energy, and emotional warmth. Combined with his round, approachable form,
This Santa projected safety and indulgence, a figure inviting trust without intimidation. Psychologists today note how images shape collective memory. The Coca-Cola Santa did not merely advertise a beverage. He crystallized the Santa we remember in our minds. Even those who never saw Sundblom's paintings recall a similar figure. Our brains store this icon not just as a cultural symbol, but as an emotional touchstone, a blend of nostalgia, joy, and the anticipation of kindness. In essence, Sundblom created a template for hope, a face for intangible feelings that, until then, had drifted loosely between folklore, poems, and family traditions. Before Coca-Cola, Santa existed mostly in words, sketches, or occasional paintings. Each household might imagine him differently, shaped by local customs or family storytelling. Sundblom's Santa gave him consistency, a public, repeatable presence, appearing in magazines, billboards, and ads each holiday season. This visibility reinforced belief, not as literal faith, but as emotional truth. People began to see Santa everywhere, in the glow of advertisements, in parades, and in store windows. Psychologically, repetition strengthens memory and emotional attachment. By becoming a common visual reference, Santa became inseparable from the idea of winter joy, generosity, and familial warmth. Thanks to Coca-Cola's international expansion, Sundblom's Santa traveled beyond the United States. From Europe to Asia, Latin America to Africa, the round red-clad figure appeared in print and on billboards, adapting subtly to local customs, but maintaining the core elements that made him universally recognizable. In doing so, Santa became a shared figure of cultural memory, a unifying image across continents. He was no longer only a child's story or a local legend. He was a collective icon, linking generations and cultures through a shared emotional experience. What makes the Coca-Cola Santa remarkable is not commercial success alone, but the psychological resonance he embodies. The image merges familiarity with wonder, nostalgia with immediacy, personal memory with cultural mythology. He reminds us that certain ideas, when given shape, can endure far beyond their origins. That, even in a rapidly changing world, a single figure, carefully designed, emotionally tuned, and visually memorable, can evoke the same warmth, hope, and excitement in children and adults alike. Santa's Coca-Cola incarnation teaches a subtle truth. While legends live in story, myth, and imagination, they gain the power to shape shared consciousness when they are given visible form. A face, a smile, a posture, a red coat glowing in the winter night. By the end of the 20th century, Santa was no longer only a folkloric figure or the subject of poems. He was a global psychological anchor. He was both the echo of St. Nicholas's generosity and the tangible, joyful figure Sundblom painted. A man who could, in a single glance, remind humanity of warmth, hope, and the small yet profound magic of giving. Chapter 7. Santa in the Modern World.
The 20th century brought Santa into homes not only through poems, songs, and advertisements, but also through the flickering lights of cinema and the bustling corridors of shopping centers. He became more than a legend. He became the heartbeat of the holiday season, the symbol that signaled warmth, family, and joy. Movies introduced Santa to generations in a deeply visual, emotional way. From black and white classics to colorful animated features, filmmakers captured him as a figure who could evoke wonder with a glance, laughter with a twinkle, or comfort with a gentle nod. The magic of cinema allowed audiences to experience Santa psychologically, not just conceptually. Viewers felt the thrill of anticipation, the tingle of possibility, and the warmth of communal celebration. Children imagined him flying across the sky. Adults remembered their own childhood wonder. Each frame reinforced the idea that Santa was both real in emotion and eternal in spirit. The mid-20th century saw Santa appear in department stores, perched atop a velvet throne, his belly round, cheeks rosy, his laughter echoing through halls of tinsel and glitter. Families queued patiently, children trembling with excitement, parents snapping photographs. This public presence transformed him into a psychological anchor for the season. Seeing Santa, children believed in miracles. Seeing their delight, adults felt a connection to their own lost childhood. Even the briefest encounter carried emotional weight. Hope, joy, and reassurance woven into a simple photo, a handshake, a whispered wish. Shopping malls, commercials, and parades made him inescapable. Santa became the pulse that guided the rhythm of December, a comforting pattern amid the chaos of daily life. Yet with visibility came complexity. The same Santa who evoked joy also intensified pressure and expectation. The modern holiday had become not only a time of wonder, but also of consumption. Lists grew longer, stores brighter, and anxieties heavier. Psychologically, Santa became intertwined with both hope and worry. Children feared disappointment. Parents felt obligated to provide. The magic of giving, once intimate and small, now danced in tandem with the weight of economic and emotional expectation. The jolly figure who once offered simple joy now bore the collective pressure of an entire culture, a mirror reflecting both delight and stress.
Cinema and advertising amplified this paradox.
Heartwarming films reminded audiences of generosity and family togetherness, while commercials suggested that happiness was measured in gifts, decor, and festivity. Santa, once a subtle guide to kindness, now stood at the intersection of joy and consumer anxiety, embodying both human aspiration and societal pressure. Despite these tensions, Santa continued to evolve. Across the world, he adapted to local traditions while retaining the core psychological cues: warmth, generosity, hope. In Japan, he arrived in department stores and on television screens, blending seamlessly with seasonal rituals. In Latin America, he appeared alongside nativity scenes, bridging old and new stories. This universality reinforced the emotional significance of Santa. Beyond gifts and spectacle, he remained a symbol of continuity, reminding humans across cultures of simple truths: empathy, anticipation, and shared joy.
Even amidst commercial pressures, his presence triggered memories of warmth and wonder, a psychological touchstone that transcended geography. The modern Santa embodies the dual nature of human emotion. He carries the delight of belief, the reassurance of ritual, and the thrill of surprise. Yet he also reflects anxiety, expectation, and longing, reminders that joy and pressure often coexist. Cinematically, one can imagine a bustling mall. Lights twinkle, laughter resonates, snow machines dust the air. And yet, in a corner, a child hesitates, unsure. Santa kneels, smiles, listens. In that instant, the noise fades. The moment is intimate. That is the essence of Santa's enduring power. He mediates between chaos and calm, between wonder and reality, reminding humans that hope exists, even in complicated, noisy worlds. Santa in the modern world is more than a marketing image, a movie character, or a festive tradition. He is a psychological phenomenon, a symbol that balances joy and expectation, comfort and longing, childhood and adulthood. Even in an era of commercialization, he remains a gentle guide, encouraging us to pause, to believe, to give, and to feel the small, profound magic that a figure in red can bring into our hearts. Chapter 8. Who Santa is to us. Santa Claus is more than a man in red, more than a myth passed down through centuries. He is a living symbol, a mirror reflecting the deep, sometimes hidden longings of the human heart. Across time, cultures, and stories, he has remained a vessel for the same essential emotions: hope, generosity, wonder, and the longing to be seen and loved. Historically, Santa began as Saint Nicholas, a figure of kindness and protection for the vulnerable. He became wrapped in legends, absorbed into folklore, and eventually reimagined in literature, advertising, and cinema. Each transformation was not merely about aesthetics. It reflected human psychology. Societies projected their needs onto him, for reassurance, for moral guidance, for comfort in times of uncertainty. Psychologically, he exists because humans crave a touchstone for hope. In childhood, that hope is literal. The anticipation of gifts, the magic of surprise. As adults, that same symbol becomes metaphorical, a reminder to give, to nurture, to sustain the belief that goodness can exist even when life is complex or challenging. Santa carries the weight of collective expectation, yet he does so lightly, offering the illusion of effortless joy, while we learn the subtler lessons beneath. Across the world, Santa adapts. In the United States, he rides sleighs and jingles bells in shopping malls. In Nordic countries, he is intertwined with Yule traditions, lighting the dark winter with humor and warmth. In Latin America, his presence often coexists with nativity scenes, a bridge between sacred history and secular celebration. These cultural adaptations reveal a universal truth. Humans need figures that embody continuity, comfort, and hope. Santa is not limited by geography or era because the emotional needs he satisfies, connection, generosity, and reassurance, are universal. He is a lens through which people interpret their world, a psychological guide in the midst of uncertainty and change. Why do people, young and old, respond so strongly to Santa? The answer lies in empathy, imagination, and memory. Children anticipate his arrival with a mixture of fear and excitement, learning patience and trust. Adults, remembering that anticipation, find a spark of their own lost innocence, a chance to reconnect with wonder. Santa is also a mirror of moral imagination. The stories of kindness, of giving without expectation, remind us of the capacity for empathy and compassion. He embodies the idea that one small act, a gift, a gesture, a smile, can ripple outward, touching hearts far beyond what we see. In this sense, Santa is not just a cultural icon. He is a psychological archetype, a symbol of the enduring human desire to nurture and be nurtured. Perhaps the most profound truth about Santa Claus is that he has never been one man. He has always been all of us. He exists in the generosity we show to strangers, the quiet moments of care we extend to friends and family, the hope we maintain in times of darkness. He is the embodiment of shared humanity, the visible face of invisible kindness. Cinematically, one can imagine a snow-dusted street. A child peers out of a window. A family gathers around a glowing tree. And somewhere in the imagination of that moment, Santa is present. Not as a distant figure, but as the essence of what each heart longs to give and receive. That is the power of Santa. He is timeless, mutable, and deeply personal, existing simultaneously as story, symbol, and lived experience. Santa reminds us that magic lives in human connection. Even in a world dominated by commerce and spectacle, the essence of Santa is not material. It is emotional and psychological. It is the encouragement to hope, the willingness to give, and the quiet recognition that our actions, however small, resonate with meaning. In families, communities, and cultures, he provides a shared narrative, a common rhythm that unites us. Through laughter, giving, storytelling, and anticipation, Santa allows individuals to participate in a collective experience, one that strengthens bonds, fosters empathy, and celebrates the shared journey of human life. As snow falls softly on rooftops and streets glow with warm light, we realize that Santa Claus is more than legend. He is a mirror of ourselves, reflecting our fears, hopes, and dreams. He shows us that generosity and wonder are not confined to childhood or fantasy. They are timeless qualities we carry forward in our daily lives. In that gentle, cinematic light, it becomes clear: Santa has never been a single man. He has always been all of us, embodying the shared pulse of hope, kindness, and imagination that connects humanity across time and space. If this journey through history,
legend, and psychology has sparked curiosity, wonder, or even a little warmth in your heart, consider joining us for more stories that explore the extraordinary in the ordinary. Subscribe to the channel to continue these gentle journeys into history and human experience. Leave a comment sharing your favorite Santa memory. We'd love to hear how this timeless figure lives in your own life. And if you enjoyed the story, hit like and share with someone who could use a touch of seasonal magic today. Because stories like Santa's aren't just to be watched, they're to be felt, remembered, and shared.